This is Srimad Bhagavatam, February. You remember the last lesson of February, and March, the first lesson in March. So we're in Canto 3, Chapter 7, Vidura's Inquiries, Text 30. Vidura continued. Please also describe the expansions of different sacrifices and the paths of mystic powers, analytical study of knowledge, and devotional service, all with their respective regulations. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. Sankhya philosophy is the basic principle of acquiring knowledge, as will be explained by the sage Maitreya. The Sankhya philosophy enunciated by Kapila Dev, the son of Devahuti, is the real source of knowledge about the supreme truth. Knowledge not based on the Sankhya philosophy is mental speculation and can yield no tangible profit. Just for everyone's information, for a little more long-term study of this third canto, as I looked ahead to the chapters we'll be reading, the third canto can almost be broken down into two main divisions. One is what we're doing now, is Maitreya's Vidura questioning, Maitreya answering in the beginning, up to the point of Sarga and Visarga. If you're not speaking, please remember to mute. Somebody's not muted. So what we'll do is now through probably the end of June, perhaps some of July, we'll study up to the point of Kapila, which is mentioned here in this verse. That's why I'm in this purport. That's why I'm explaining it. Then we'll take a short break of a month or two. And next fall, and probably September or October, we'll start studying Lord Kapila Dev's instructions to his mother Devahuti, which is almost the second half of the third canto, a little less than that. But Sankhya philosophy, the Sankhya understanding the difference between matter and spirit and the details of that science will be presented then. Text 31. Please also describe the imperfections and contradictions of the faithless atheists, the situation of crossbreeding, and the movements of the living entities in various species of life according to their particular modes of nature and work. Samapriya, did you make it on? Okay, Vaishnavi, if you can somehow or another, maybe call her, Sama, and I'll go here. Okay, Jayashri, you want to start reading the next verse, please?
Sure. Srimad Bhagavatam 3:7, 32, and 33. You may also describe the non-contradictory causes of religiosity, economic development, sense gratification, and salvation, and also the different means of livelihood and different processes of law and order as mentioned in the revealed scriptures. Please also explain the regulations for offering respects to the forefathers, the creation of Pitraloka, the time schedule in the planets, stars, and luminaries, and their respective situations. Purport. The time durations of day and night, as well as months and years, are different in the different planets, stars, and luminaries. The higher planets like the moon and Venus have time measurements different from those of the earth. It is said that 6 months of this planet Earth equals 1 day of the higher planets. In the Bhagavad Gita, the duration of 1 day in Brahmaloka is measured to be 1,000 times the 4 yugas, or 4,300,000 years multiplied by 1,000. And the month and year in Brahmaloka are calculated in that measure.
So a question might be raised, why would Vidura ask so much about and want to know so much about time? Any realizations on that, or how time is relative? Jayashri?
Well, our time is very short here, but compared to that, I remember when I was listening to it, I was like, oh my God, one day is like nothing to them, what we have here. But that's my only thought that I had.
Anybody else?
Others.
Okay. It will actually get quite detailed in future chapters. There's one called Time Calculated by the Atom. And just for a basic explanation, the basic time is eternal. It has no beginning and no end, but is calculated or impresses upon us its influence by how it reacts to each material thing. So the time duration in the life of an ant, the time duration in the life of a human, and the time duration in Lord Brahma are all relative to that particular entity. The ant's life is 100 years in its time. The human's life is 100 years in its time. And Lord Brahma's 100 years is 100 years of his time. So understanding that helps us more clearly perceive how it influences us and how there's something beyond that restriction. Just a second, Simon said, what's up?
Did you ask Vaishnavi if she's there?
Vaishnavi, are you present?
Not at the moment. This is Gopal.
Gopal's there.
Big stuff for.
I tell him I can't get on.
Gopal, we're having trouble with Samapriya getting online.
And mine too.
And Manvantara, there's something in the configuration of people signing in. So can you have her take a look at it or take a look at it yourself?
Yes.
Vaishnavi, Samapriya is going to call you on the phone, okay?
Yes. Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, we'll go next to Anita.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Srimad Bhagavatam 3.7.34 to 35. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Please also describe the fruitive results of charity and penance and of digging reservoirs of water. Please describe the situation of persons who are away from home and also the duty of a man in an awkward position. O sinless one, because the personality of Godhead, the controller of all living entities, is the father of all religion and all those who are candidates for religious activities, kindly describe how he can be completely satisfied. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. All religious activities are meant ultimately to satisfy the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The Lord is the father of all religious principles, as stated in the Bhagavad Gita 7.16. Four kinds of pious men, the needy, the distressed, the enlightened, and the inquisitive, approach the Lord in devotional service, and their devotion is mixed with the material affection. But above them are the pure devotees, whose devotion is not tainted by any material tinges of fruitive work or speculative knowledge. Those who are only miscreants throughout their lives are compared to demons. Bhagavad Gita 7.15. They are bereft of all knowledge in spite of any academic educational career they may pursue. Such miscreants are never candidates for satisfying the Lord.
Do you have some realizations about these questions by Vidura? Basically, the reason for performing rituals, for performing religious acts is what? Why perform them? What is the purpose behind them? Anita?
To, if they have like a material desire or whatever to satisfy to that particular reason, to, you know, if they are doing like a demigod's worship.
Why would
And
anybody, right?
And if they are doing with the pure devotional service, it's just like to satisfy the Lord. That's why they do the devotional service.
Exactly. So what Vidura is asking in all these different inquiries concerning human society is, please explain them in relationship to how they please the Lord. And there are so many different categories according to the modes of material nature and the different individuals, just as time influences different living entities differently. We just covered that. Similarly, the modes of material nature are such that they condition living entities differently. And he's asking, please explain what those religious activities are in the different divisions of human society. There are different actions meant to be done by different types of people. Basically, there's 4 types of good people who approach the Lord, and then the rest are all demons, according to this purport.
So like in the Bhagavad Gita, chapter 7, Chaturvidha Bhajante Mai, so these are like, and the 3 mode, the goodness and the passion and ignorance. So like, depending on what kind of mode that person is, they are praying. But these 4 pious men, they are the good people. Depends, it depends, like if they are needy, they are not, so depending on what kind of category they are under. So based on that, they are praying to the Lord and
Very
based on their modes.
Okay, good. Next is Nanda. Nanda, are you with us?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Oh, I didn't know I was unmuted. Sorry. Sorry. Okay. Srimad Bhagavatam, 3rd canto, 7th chapter, 36 and 37. O best among the Brahmins, those who are spiritual masters are very kind to the needy. They're always kind to their followers, disciples, and sons. And without being asked by them, the spiritual master describes all that is knowledge. Please describe how many dissolutions there are for the elements of material nature and who survives after the dissolution to serve the Lord while he is asleep. Purport. After the discussion of the material manifestations, the Lord and his kingdom beyond the causal ocean do not disappear, nor do the inhabitants, the Lord's associates. The associates of the Lord are far more numerous than the living entities who have forgotten the Lord due to material association. The impersonalist explanation of the word aham in the 4 verses of the original Bhagavatam, aham evasya eva gre, is refuted here. The Lord and his eternal associates remain after the dissolution. Vidura's inquiry about such persons is a clear indication of the existence of all the paraphernalia of the Lord. This is also confirmed in the Kasi Kanda, as quoted by both Jiva Goswami and Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti, who follow in the footsteps of Srila Sridhar Swami. Quote, the devotees of the Lord never annihilate their individual existences, not even after the dissolution of the entire cosmic manifestation. The Lord and the devotees who associate with him are always eternal in both the material and spiritual worlds.
Very nice. Can you give us some insight as to why, what the importance of this concept?
Well, I don't know if I can do that, but I can just tell you what things that struck me about it. The thing is that even to ask a question like this, you have to have a lot of knowledge about Krishna and his kingdom and everything. Because who would even think to ask a question, who remains to serve the Lord after after the material world is dissolved? You know what I mean? Just even that type of a question is like, wow, Anyway, it's imbued with a service attitude, because to make sure that the Lord has some people to still serve him while he's sleeping. Anyway, and then the in the second paragraph of the purport at the end, where it talks about Srila Jiva Goswami and Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur's comments, very closely following Sridhar Swami's comments or his original explanation. That also is a very reassuring emphasis on the importance of getting the knowledge directly through the parampara, and therefore handed down from guru to disciple, we understand that we're getting the original purport of the Bhagavatam verses. That's all.
How about a little bit how Srila Prabhupada relates this concept to the original Bhagavatam verse, that Chatushloki verse.
Yeah, the aham evasya eva gray. I think I would need help with that. I don't know how to relate it to it.
Okay, the way I understanding is Prabhupada's explaining that, and it's a very well-known concept in any theology, but the Vedic concepts describe details. By describing details, then the human nature to inquire becomes more fulfilled because there's more information about why and how it happens. So the basic concept is that beyond the material world, there's a kingdom of God. He says, after the dissolution of the material manifestations, the Lord and his kingdom beyond the causal ocean do not disappear, nor do the inhabitants, the Lord's associates. In other words, it's a real core issue. And by bringing up the concepts of this world and how some of it's annihilated and some of it isn't, but ultimately it all will be, and describing these details very scientifically, which will take place in Maitreya's answers to these questions, then the human intellect and the desire to know more about the eternal kingdom of God becomes more solidified because of the strong foundation of information given about how this material world acts. That's my understanding of why it's important, or why these are so relevant to know.
Thank you.
Should I take over?
Yes,
now?
please. Thank you.
Okay, I'm
a
sorry.
little
Sorry,
cheer
everyone.
instead of the grave
Hare
man.
Krishna. No.
Okay.
Thank you so much for
So
your patience.
Jayashree, Anita, and Nanda have read so far.
Okay, how about Tisha? Tisha, would you like to read this? Unmute, darling.
Okay, yes, but I have a question about the refuted part. Like on the last verse, what's refuted? I guess I'm not understanding that when Prabhupada said that verse of the Chatra Shloki is refuted here. That, yeah. Like
The impersonalists are giving this kind of go back to the verse, Betsy. The impersonalists are giving some reason, but it's being refuted. It's not. It's being counteracted. Right?
What is that explanation that they give?
Yes. Well, I guess you don't really.
We do know.
What was that?
What is the explanation that they give that's refuted herein?
You answer that, because I'm still confused a little here.
I don't know.
Okay. Aham means I.
Right.
The first verse of the Chatur Shloki Bhagavatam is Aham evasam eva gre. Before the material world existed, only I existed. And when it says I, Srila Prabhupada explains that's like the king. When the king says I exist, it means his armies, his paraphernalia also. So again, we're back to the distinction between the material world and the spiritual kingdom. Before the material world existed, I existed. The impersonalists take this I as the impersonal Brahman, the energy of eternity, but there's no real personality, paraphernalia, abodes, or anything like that in their concept. So Srila Prabhupada is saying that by asking about the disillusions, and the Lord is sleeping during that disillusion, it means he existed. He didn't poof into nothingness and then manifest again. He's sleeping. He's the verse 37 up top. Please describe how many dissolutions there are for the elements of the material nature, and who survives after the dissolutions to serve the Lord while he is asleep, which means that something's still going on, even though the rest of it has been demolished. Somebody still exists. And that refutes the concept that the impersonalists have, that everything is dissolved, or
Okay,
that there
thank
is
you.
no personality.
All right.
Okay?
Thank you so much. Yes.
Next.
Okay. Srimad Bhagavatam 3:7, verse 38. What are the truths regarding the living entities and the Supreme Personality of Godhead? What are their identities? What are the specific values in the knowledge in the Vedas? And what are the necessities for the spiritual master and his disciples? Purport by Srila Prabhupada. The living entities are constitutionally servitors of the Lord who can accept all kinds of service from everyone. It is clearly declared in Bhagavad Gita 5.29 that the Lord is the supreme enjoyer of the benefits of all sacrifices and penances, the proprietor of all that is manifested, and the friend of all living entities. That is his real identity. Therefore, when the living entity accepts the supreme proprietorship of the Lord and acts in that attitude, he resumes his real identity. In order to elevate the living entity to this standard of knowledge, there is the necessity of spiritual association. The bona fide spiritual master desires that his disciples know the process of rendering transcendental service to the Lord. And the disciples also know that they have to learn about the eternal relationship between God and the living entities from a self-realized soul. To disseminate transcendental knowledge, one must retire from mundane activities on the strength of enlightenment in knowledge in terms of Vedic wisdom. That is the sum and substance of all the questions in this verse.
Okay, so what does this, there's a very important verse that is being actually quoted here. Can anyone tell me what that is? In the purport, yeah. Who can say, I know, Jayashree? Can you tell me what verse that is? I know you know this one.
Uktaram yagna
Oh, Anita, good girl.
Lokamaheshwaram
Good.
Suhidam sarvabhutanam Yatva mam shantim rachyati.
Okay, good. Now translate. Very good.
That is the peace formula.
That is the peace formula. And Krishna says that I am, you can translate it, Anita. Okay, well, we see it on the words there. It's being explained. I am the proprietor of everything. I am the enjoyer of everything. And I am the dearmost friend, Suridam Sarvabhutani. So you can see it here in the verse. This is also an explanation of who Krishna really is, who is our Lord and Master. He's in charge of everything. I really liked that reference that Prabhupada gave. Okay. Any questions? Any more questions, Tisha, or anyone else on this verse before we go on? Okay, so next, Bhadraji.
Actually, I had, as we were reading it, I kind of got a light bulb experience. Srila Prabhupada is such a spiritual genius that in these two paragraphs, he practically overviews these questions by Vidura. The first ones are, what are the truths regarding the living entities in the Supreme Personality of Godhead? What are their identities? And in the first paragraph, he even in the first sentence, he practically covers it. The living entities are constitutionally servitors of the Lord who can accept all kinds of service from everyone. So this is the truth of the living entities and who the Supreme Personality of Godhead is. He is the person that can accept service from every single living entity everywhere. And the living entities are constitutionally his servants. Next, what are the specific values in knowing the Vedas? And what are the necessities for the spiritual master and his disciples? And this whole second paragraph explains how, in order to elevate the living entity to the standard of knowledge, it's necessary that we have spiritual association. And that's the bona fide spiritual master. So he like encapsulates that entire topic in just that short span.
Jai Srila Prabhupada. Thank you. Okay, shall we go on
Yes.
with Bhadra reading?
Hare Krishna, Dandavat everybody. 3739. Spotless devotees of the Lord have mentioned the source of such knowledge. How could one have knowledge of devotional service and detachment without the help of such devotees?
Speak a little louder, Bhadra.
Yeah. Purport. Even the great transcendental scholar Vyasadeva had need of a spiritual master, and under the instruction of his spiritual master Narada, he prepared this sublime literature, Srimad Bhagavatam. Even Lord Chaitanya, although he is the Krishna himself, accepted of his spiritual master. Even Lord Krishna accepted as spiritual master Sandipani Muni. In order to be enlightened, and all the acharyas and saints of the world had spiritual masters. In Bhagavad Gita, Arjuna accepted Lord Krishna as his spiritual master, although there was no necessity of such a formal declaration. So in all cases, there is no question about the necessity of accepting a spiritual master. The only speculation is that the spiritual master should be a bona fide. That is, the spiritual master must be in the proper chain of disciplic succession, called the Parampara system. Pure devotees have prepared many books of knowledge on the basis of authorized scriptures. Sri Rupa Goswami and his assistants, under the instructions of Lord Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, have all written various literatures for the guidance of the prospective devotees. And anyone who is very serious about raising himself to the standard of a pure devotee of the Lord must take advantage of those literatures.
Thank you, Bhadra. Now, this is a very deep concept about the spiritual master and how he is not an ordinary person. Can you elaborate on that a little bit, Bhadraji?
Yes. Well, spiritual master is the representative of the Lord, and he is coming in the disciplic succession, Guru Parampara. So he is following in the line of disciplic succession of previous acharyas, and we are following the process of the descending, the knowledge coming in the descending in the line of, we are following that process, descending. So
Right.
of course,
Following.
Yes.
All right. How come? What do we do if there's conflict? You know, sometimes there might be some conflict. This is actually how we can check the bona fide spiritual master, that he is following and speaking the same as the whole parampara system. That's why the parampara system is there. So this particular concept about the spiritual master is the foundation of our spiritual life, because we have to accept whatever the bona fide spiritual master says as truth, and that will take us back to Godhead. But before we do that, we have to make sure that the spiritual master is authorized. Otherwise, that kind of submission will get us into deep trouble.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Bhadraji. Anyone else have something to say about the spiritual master? Of course, we have everything to say about the spiritual master, but this is an important point. Okay, so let's go on with Sesha. Sesha ji, could you read the next one? Thank you.
Hare Krishna, everyone. Srimad Bhagavatam, 3rd Canto, 7th chapter, text 40 and 41. My dear sage, I have put all these questions before you with a view to knowing the pastimes of Hari, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. You are the friend of all, so kindly describe them for all those who have lost their vision. O spotless one, your answers to all these questions will grant immunity from all material miseries. Such charity is greater than all Vedic charities, sacrifices, penances, etc. Report. The highest perfectional work of charity is to give people in general immunity from the anxieties of material existence. This can be done only by performing activities in devotional service to the Lord. Such knowledge is incomparable. Cultivation of knowledge in the Vedas, performance of sacrifice, and distribution of munificent charities altogether cannot form even a part of the immunity from the pangs of material existence that is gained from devotional service. The charity of Maitreya not only will help Vidura, but due to its universal nature, will deliver all others in all times. Thus, Maitreya is mortal.
Wow, that's okay. Sesha, explain this.
Well, the last sentence, I think, explains it. Explains the Vidura Maitreya is immortal because, as Bhadraprabhu was saying, he's coming in disciplic succession from the immortal spiritual world and the Supreme Personality of Godhead. They're a different category. They're in a different category than us. We're not immortal. We're chained in to material miseries. And Srimad Bhagavatam and pure devotees and the spiritual master, these are all free from material miseries. And they present to us a way to be free from miseries. I find it interesting that we're in the reading that the emphasis is there time and time again about how this knowledge, specifically this knowledge, mitigates the material miseries. There are a lot of Vedic instructions as mentioned in this verse: sacrifice, charity, study of the Vedas. All these things are ways in which one can approach getting free from the material miseries, but none of them is as good and as effective as Srimad Bhagavatam. And so it's reassuring to understand that Bhagavatam is specifically meant and is specifically the most potent way to become free from material miseries, because that's basically what we experience. We don't experience spiritual joy, eternal life, and not in this world. We experience miseries. And for the Bhagavatam and the spiritual master and pure devotees, as mentioned in these verses, focus specifically on us and give us a way, the most potent way to get free from material miseries. It's very reassuring.
Right. Thank you, Sesha. What's that verse in the very beginning of the Bhagavatam, describing the glories
material
of
miseries which are superfluous to him can be directly mitigated by the linking process of devotional service, but the mass of people do not know this. Therefore, Srila Vyasadeva compiled this Bhagavatam, which is in relation to the absolute truth.
and rising like the sun? What's that verse? That's what I immediately thought of. That this Bhagavatam is rising like the sun, diminishing all the darkness in the universe. It's actually, the Lord has come as the Bhagavatam. Thank you so much, Sesha. We're really, this is such a wonderful class with so many sweet senior devotees that it's just a real benediction for all of us. Thank you. Okay, well, let's you want to read the last one, because this is the last verse in the 7th canto and the 7th chapter. Seshaji, why don't you just finish up?
Okay, Srimad Bhagavatam 3:742. Sri Sukadeva Goswami said, thus the chief of the sages, who was always enthusiastic about describing topics regarding the personality of Godhead, began to narrate the descriptive explanations of the Puranas, being so infused by Vidura. He was very much enlivened by speaking on transcendental on the transcendental activities of the Lord. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. Great learned sages like Maitreya Muni are always very enthusiastic about describing the transcendental activities of the Lord. Maitreya Muni, being thus invited by Vidura to speak, appeared to be smiling because he actually felt transcendental bliss. This in the Bhaktivedanta purports of the 3rd canto, 7th chapter of the Srimad Bhagavatam, entitled Further Inquiries by Vidura.
Thank you, Sesha. That is so wonderful. We smile when we're filled with transcendental bliss, and we're all into being filled with transcendental bliss. Okay, before we start the next chapter, Pati, was there something that you want to do?
I just wanted to thank those devotees that did such nice forum entries and posts concerning the questions of Maharaj Pariksit and the questions of Vidura. When Maharaj Pariksit first asked those questions in chapter 8 of the 2nd canto, Sri Sukadeva Goswami noted that these questions by Vidura were the same. So he gradually evolved his narration to these questions, because now Maitreya will answer both of them. And there were some really nice ones, some really nice posts, which like Chaitamayi did a real nice succinct categorization of those. If you look at them, all the different topics that the questions included, and then the verses that were appropriate to those. Sulakshana also did a really nice job. Premananda did one, and then there was one other person that did some nice ones. It's just really interesting to see how the same subject matter, the same topics, the same questions can be seen from different points of view by different people. And putting them all together helps solidify better the correlation between them. So thank you for taking the time and doing this. We appreciate it. Okay, next, Sama.
Okay, how about Ian? Are you still there? You are. Why don't you read this verse, Ian? Start off the 8th chapter.
Hare Krishna, everybody. Can you hear me?
Yes, loud and clear.
Okay, Haribo.
You can start reading manifestation.
Okay, manifestation of Brahma from Gabodakasha is Vishnu. Okay, Srimad Bhagavatam 3.8.1. The great sage Maitreya Muni said to Vidura, the royal dynasty of King Puru is worthy to serve the pure devotees because all the descendants of that family are devoted to the personality of Godhead. You are also born in that family, and it is wonderful that because of your attempt, the transcendental pastimes of the Lord are becoming nearer and nearer at every moment.
Okay.
Should I continue?
Yeah, okay, continue.
Okay. Let me now begin 3.8.2. Now let me begin speaking on the Bhagavad Purana, which was directly spoken to the great sages by the personality of Godhead for the benefit of those who are entangled in extreme miseries for the sake of very little pleasure. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. The sage Maitreya proposed to speak on Srimad Bhagavatam because it was especially compiled and traditionally comes down in the disciplic succession for the solution of all the problems of human society. Only one who is fortunate can have the opportunity to hear Srimad Bhagavatam in the association of pure devotees of the Lord. Under the spell of material energy, the living entities are entrapped in the bondage of many difficulties simply for the sake of a little bit of material happiness. They engage in fruitive activities, not knowing the implications. Under the false impression that the body is a self, the living entities foolishly relate to so many false attachments. They think that they can engage with materialistic paraphernalia forever. This gross misconception of life is so strong that a person suffers continually life after life under the external energy of the Lord. If one comes in contact with the book Bhagavatam as well as the devotee Bhagavata, who knows what the Bhagavatam is, then such a fortunate man gets out of material entanglement. Therefore, Sri Maitreya Muni, out of compassion for the suffering men of the world, proposes to speak on the Srimad Bhagavatam first and last.
Oh, that gives us hope. What do you think of this, Ian? Can you add to that? What is the point that you particularly identify with? So encouraging.
Oh, it is not recommended that we engage in fruitive activities, just for a little bit of happiness.
It's definitely not recommended for a little bit of happiness working so hard.
Yeah.
That's very good. Anything else you see there?
If you could put back this
Put the
slide, I
screen.
would say a good
Put the
slide.
screen back, please.
Oh, the importance of the book Bhagavatam and the person Bhagavatam. Okay, the devotee. So, it is stressed here. If one comes in contact with the book Bhagavatam as well as the devotee Bhagavata, who knows what the Bhagavatam is, then such a fortunate man gets out of the material entanglement. So we see the Bhagavatam and the Bhagavata, they are important.
Most important, because we become who we associate with.
Yes.
We want to associate with the Bhagavad and the Bhagavatam. Okay, thank you.
Okay.
There's another point. There's another point that jumps out at me when Maitreya begins to answer. He's just had a barrage of so many different topics presented before him by Vidura with a real sincerity to understand. One of those previous questions we just read are, what is the meaning of all the Vedic practices and sacrifices and charity and digging wells and so many different things. And the Vedas themselves are a vast canon of information, all the different categories of knowledge. And out of all the things, he's a rishi, he's Maitreya Rishi. He's so well learned in all the different aspects of information and knowledge. And he's choosing to speak on this specific book, the Bhagavad Purana, as the answer to all those questions placed by Vidura. Previously, Samapriya alluded to this verse. It's Krishna Swadamo Bhagate Dharma Jnana Dibihi Saha. It means Krishna Dhamma Swago Bhagate. After Krishna has left and gone to his own abode, this reflects back to the first canto, second canto, where Maharaj Pariksit, actually the sages of Namasharanya asked Sutta Goswami, where has religious principles gone now that the Lord is left? Krishna Swadamo Bhagate Dharma Jnana Dibihi Saha, along with knowledge and religion, he's left. Dharma Jnana Dibihi Saha Kalo Nasta Drishamesha Purana Ko Dunoditaha, that in this dark age of Kali, this Purana has arisen like the sun. So this specific knowledge in Bhagavad Gita is weaved along with the prema that Lord Chaitanya has brought to this material, this particular lokas during this age of Kali. And by weaving them together, the holy name and the Srimad Bhagavatam and the different activities of devotional service, that prema becomes nourished specifically by the information in this book. Jai Srimad Bhagavatam.
Very well. Okay, we're going to go on now with Chaitamayi. Would you like to read? Yeah.
Yes, Prabhu. Yes, thank you so much. And just a comment on that last purport, which is that Shri Maitreya Muni, out of compassion for the suffering men in the world, proposes to speak. And we are also so fortunate that you, Samapriya, and Dhruva Maharaj have both so compassionately organized this forum for us to really hear, and for me particularly to assimilate so much information. This, because of this format that you have, that we write each week and we read together and we discuss, it's really starting to sink in, and that's due to your great compassion. So thank you for that. Hari Bol. Srimad Bhagavatam 3.8.3.5. Some time ago, being inquisitive to know, Sanat Kumar, the chief of the boy saints, accompanied by other great sages, inquired exactly like you about the truths regarding Vasudeva, the Supreme, from Lord Sankarshan, who is seated at the bottom of the universe. At that time, Lord Shankarshan was meditating upon his Supreme Lord, whom the learned esteem as Lord Vasudeva. But for the sake of the advancement of the great learned sages, he slightly opened his lotus-like eyes and began to speak. The sages came from the highest planets down to the lower region through the water of the Ganges, and therefore the hair on their heads was wet. They touched the lotus feet of the Lord, which are worshipped with various paraphernalia by the daughters of the Serpent King when they desire good husbands.
Continue.
Purport by Srila Prabhupada. The Ganges water flows directly from the lotus feet of Vishnu, and its course runs from the highest planet of the universe down to the lowest. The sages came down from Satyaloka by taking advantage of the flowing water, a process of transportation made possible by the power of mystic yoga. If a river flows thousands and thousands of miles, a perfect yogi can at once transport himself from one place to another simply by dipping in its water. The Ganges is the only celestial river which flows throughout the universe, and great sages travel all over the universe via this sacred river. The statement that their hair was wet indicates that it was directly moistened by the water originating from the lotus feet of Vishnu, the Ganges. Whoever touches the water of the Ganges to his head surely touches the lotus feet of the Lord directly and can become free from all effects of sinful acts. If after taking bath in the Ganges or being washed of all sins, a man guards himself against committing further sinful acts, then certainly he is delivered. But if he again takes up sinful activities, his bath in the Ganges is as good as that of the elephant, who nicely takes his bath in the river, but later spoils the whole thing by covering himself with dust on the land. This is a wonderful assessment of the quality of Ganges water, and the fact that the Ganges is a vehicle and people travel on it throughout the universe. I before reading this purport, I had no concept that was its potency. And I did have a question, which is that the Ganges flows downward, but does it also flow back upward in order to facilitate the yogis traveling from here to there? In other words, my question is, does it flow in all directions, not just from up to down? It must flow in all directions.
The yogis, my understanding is the yogis, it doesn't matter. They don't have to swim against the tide. You know, they dunk in and then they come out. You know, it's just that It's the vehicle through which they travel. Oh, here's Seisha. Seisha, can you add to that?
I can't ask, I just have another question about the
Oh,
gun.
let's just, was that a satisfactory
Yeah,
answer?
that's very good. It's
Kata,
just
you-
mind,
Yeah.
it's
No,
mind
that's my
blowing to me.
understanding also. It's a mystic siddhi, being able to
Yeah.
travel. So it's
It's
subtle.
amazing.
It's not against the tide.
It's
No,
just amazing, and it reinforces the practice that those of us who are involved in hospice, we want to make sure that the person who's traveling gets at least one drop of Ganges water on them, because it immediately puts them in touch with Krishna and facilitates their journey towards him.
Definitely
Krishna.
purifying. Thank you. Seishaji?
Yeah, my question is also just sort of a fact question about the Ganga. And I know both you and Juvaraj lived in Mayapur for some time. Is all the water, the groundwater and everything considered Ganga, or just within the banks?
Oh, good. Hati, take that.
My understanding is that all the water, and I wanted to ask Bhadra to also speak on the Ganges, since he's a Tirtha traveler. My understanding is that it is the water underneath certainly is also Ganges, but there's the Jalangi, which is like the Saraswati. There are different rivers, and they all merge into the Ganges. If you look at a map of India, where the Ganges comes out of the Himalayas and travels on, it's even called the Gangalic Plain. It travels all along from the west down along through India, and then branches into millions and millions of little branches as it enters into the Bay of Bengal, south of Calcutta. And all those are considered, and along the way, naturally, other tributaries, for example, the Jamuna at Prayag meets the Ganges. So by the time that Ganges water gets to Mayapur, it's filled with all the different holy rivers from that area and traveling along, and certainly all the water, even underneath, yes, underneath the earth is also considered the Ganges water. Like if you dig a well and drink the water, you're getting Ganges water.
Also in Vrindavan, the same thing. They
Right.
used to grow watermelon on the bank of the Yamuna, and it was considered that those watermelon are directly drinking the Yamuna. So everything is growing on the banks of the river, that is all sacred water. So yes.
Thank you.
Bhadra, you want to give a little Ganges Kata? Since we're on the topic.
You already did everything.
No, come on, you got more than that. So many nice Ganges dips.
Or Yamuna.
Oh, you know.
Mr. Parikrama. Or Yamuna.
Well, some other time, let's.
How about just the concept that Srila Prabhupada brings up in the purport, that one can actually be purified by bathing in sacred rivers?
Mm-hmm. Well, we know that the person, Srila Prabhupada also mentions that people go to take a bath in the Ganges. That is good and it is purifying, but the main purpose is to go in the sacred places to inquire and come in contact with the great personality to hear about it. Because Ganges water, taking bath is going to benefit definitely. But then the tendency is there to be again perform the sinful activities, So it is gradual process, but the main purpose is to go to the holy places, to come in association with devotees, inquire from them, and at the same time do the parikrama, take a bath in the Jamuna and Ganges water.
Thank you very much. And that's the perfect segue as to now the Sanat Kumar and the great sages have traveled in the Ganges, and they're going to hear from the great, not devotee, but Supreme Lord Sankarshan. So we'll go on to the next verse. Thank you. Thank you all.
Before we go, I just wanted to mention, did everybody catch that statement about how Sanat Kumar's hair was wet from dipping in and going down to the bottom of the universe? that was some kind of proof that his hair got wet. I thought that was kind of cool. Hare Krishna.
Yes.
Okay, so now we'll go on with Mandantara. Would you like to read? On this Vaishnavi with a question. Should we take a question first real quick, Vaishnavi?
Yes, the question is
Louder, dear, louder.
when we speak about getting purified by bathing Ganga, doesn't Prabhupada say somewhere in one of the purports in Chaitanya Charitamrita about the other seven also?
You have to speak louder, and there's interruption in your voice there. Static.
Can you hear me better now?
No, you're still
No.
real low, but you said something about, Prabhupada said something in a purport and then we couldn't hear.
Okay, let me get my.
Or scream. Oh, okay.
No, I mean in one of the purports in Chaitanya Charitamrita, doesn't Prabhupada talk about getting purified by taking bath in the other 7 sacred rivers also in India, like Godavari, Kaveri,
Yes.
Narmada?
Yeah, definitely. There are many, 7 holy rivers. He does. But I think he just pointed out in this particular purport that it's the only river that travels throughout the universe. Wasn't that what it said?
Yeah. And another point is that the Bhagavatam is even more potent at this point for Kali Yuga, for us. Yeah. There you go. Oh, geography of the universe there. Okay. Okay, Vaishnavi? All right. Mamatarji, would you like to read?
The 4 Kumaras, headed by Snat Kumara, who all knew the transcendental pastimes of the Lord, glorified the Lord in the rhythmic accents with selected words full of affection and love. At that time, Lord Sankarshan, with his thousands of raised hoods, began to radiate an effulgence from the glowing stones on his head. Lord Sankarshan thus spoke the purport of Srimad Bhagavatam to the great sage Sanat Kumara, who had already taken the vow of renunciation. Sanat Kumara also, in his truth, when inquired by Sankyana Muni, explained Srimad Bhagavatam as he had heard it from Sankarshan. Purport. This is the way of Parampara system. Although the Sanat Kumara, the well-known great saintly Kumara, was in the perfect stage of life, still he heard the message of Srimad Bhagavatam from Lord Sankarshan. Similarly, when he was questioned by Sankyana Rishi, he spoke to him the same message he had heard from Lord Sankarshan. In other words, unless one hears from the proper authority, one cannot become a preacher. In devotional service, therefore, 2 items out of the 9, namely hearing and chanting, are most important. Without hearing nicely, one cannot preach the message of Vedic knowledge.
Do you have a comment on that major important verse and purport?
No, other than to say it's the footsteps onto devotional service, hearing and chanting.
Right. And hearing from the authority. Again, we see that.
Right.
Anyone else? Pati, you want to add to that? Madhurya Leelaji.
Yeah, I did not remember that it was Lord Shankarshan that first spoke the Bhagavatam to the Kumaras. So it was, but I guess that was way back in time, and then it was restarted with Vyasadeva.
Yes, that'll be brought up in our next purport. But I think it's really far out. I mean, they've gone to the bottom of the universe. One of the things that struck me was we're followers of the Brahma Sampradaya. So we're following information from the first created being. How do we get knowledge about what existed prior to him? So here we have his sons, the Kumaras, traveling through the Ganges, going to the bottom of the universe and asking the Lord, Sankarshan, who produces the whole thing, these same questions that Vidura had asked and that Maharaj Parikshit asked Sukadev Goswami. So we're in essence hearing from Lord Sankarshan, who resides at the bottom of the universe. That's quite amazing to me.
This is also another important point, again, for the Parampara system. It is so important because, you know, that's why Prabhupada wrote these books, so they would last and be we could see that they are the essence of truth for the next 10,000 years, we hope. It's so important because we won't be here. None of us will be here. We might understand something, but it's very important that when we're delivering this message, because we are all of us are delivering this message here, that we turn everyone to Srila Prabhupada's books for confirmation. Yes, Bhadra?
It's a little bit confusing here because Kumaras are the sons of Lord Brahma, and Brahma was spoken the Chatur Shloki Srimad Bhagavatam. Brahma performed the tapasya, tapa,
Right.
and spoke the Chatur Shloki Bhagavatam, and then of course Vyasdev put it in 18,000 slokas of Srimad Bhagavatam. Now, how does this Kumaras come here with going to the bottom and talk with and ask the Lord Sankarshan is coming? Can someone enlighten this?
That seems like that is God himself who is going to be delivering the Bhagavatam based on the 4 verses. So I mean,
No, his question was, previously we heard how the Lord heard how Brahma heard the Bhagavatam from the Lord. Now we're hearing Sanat Kumar hearing from another Lord Sankarshan. How is it? Is that your question, Bhadra?
Yeah, and 4 Kumaras are the sons of Lord Brahma.
Right.
So is that probably in the previous millennium?
What's the difficulty?
Is it a previous? Well, I mean, is it in the previous millennium? Previous what you call sometimes kalpa? Because there are so many kalpas.
It's actually going to be explained in the next verse. So
I see.
I don't want to say.
Oh, in the next verse. But
Yes.
I had a point before we actually get the absolute truth from Nandaji. Actually, Nanda, tell us. Nandaji.
I have a question. It's not, I don't have a comment. I have a question. So you wanted to say your thing first?
Well, I just thought that Bhakti Vinod even sent his son to take initiation from someone else, to hear from someone else. So what is wrong with Lord Brahma?
Sama, once again, it will be explained in the next.
Oh, it will be explained. That was my speculation.
Okay.
Forgive me.
No problem.
Okay. Nandaji.
So my question is again about the parampara, because we keep stressing it's so important to hear from parampara. That's not my argument, but my question is that even right here, we're hearing about Sankyayana Muni and Lord Sesha, this and that. So there's different paramparas, and there's 4 different paramparas that are bona fide, you know, and they have different conclusions. So it's just interesting because we stress parampara, sorry if this is not correctly worded, but as if our parampara is the only parampara and everything else is bogus.
Very good point. I mean, no, it's not. True.
Okay.
Sounds neophyte. It sounds like the description of a neophyte devotee to
Like
think
somebody
that
standing on a branch of a tree thinking they're the only branch.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Okay, how are we going to get over that? How are we going to get over that?
maybe we should read the next verse.
Okay, that's a great idea. Great idea.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, Madhurya Leela, why don't you read the next verse? Thank you. I want to thank Mama Tar. Thank you. We both had problems coming in this morning. Madhurya?
Okay, so the great sage, this is Srimad Bhagavatam 3:8-9. The great sage Sankyayana was a chief amongst the transcendentalists. And when he was describing the glories of the Lord in terms of Srimad Bhagavatam, so happened my spiritual master Parashara and Rihespati both heard him. The great Parashara, being so advised by the great sage Pulastya, spoke to me the foremost of the Puranas, Bhagavatam. I shall also describe this before you, my dear son, in terms of my hearing, because you are always my faithful follower. Purport. As the great speaker of the Puranas, Parashara first of all spoke on Srimad Bhagavatam, spoke the Srimad Bhagavata Purana because it was the foremost of all Puranas. Maitreya Muni desired to narrate the same Bhagavatam he had heard from Parashara, and Vidura was qualified to hear it because of his faithfulness and his following the instructions received from superiors. So Srimad Bhagavatam was being narrated from time immemorial by disciplic succession, even before the time of Vyasadeva. The so-called historians calculate the Puranas to be only a few hundred years old, but actually the Puranas existed from time immemorial before all historical calculations of the mundaners and speculative philosophers.
Okay, so you wanted us to read this verse, Patsy. Could you explain why?
Because Srimad Bhagavatam is eternal, and it can be heard in different kalpas. It can be heard by unlimited people. It's always spoken by who speaks the Bhagavad Purana? Who's the original speaker?
Lord Krishna.
Shankarshan, Lord Shankarshan.
This particular one was Lord Sankarshan. During one of the Padma Kalpa with the Brahma Samhita, it was spoken by Lord Krishna, because Brahma said Pakara, Chintamani Pakara Sadmasho Kalpa Vriksha. He's actually seeing Goloka Vrindavan. So it's like a tree as it grows, and sometimes different trunks become bifurcated and may expand, but it's all from the same tree. And then it goes off into different branches. So any form of the Lord, like Hamsa, any form of the Lord can speak Srimad Bhagavatam. It's eternal, it's the Bhagavad Purana, it's eternal knowledge spoken by different forms of the Lord to different people at different times. And it creates different expansions and branches just the way a tree does, but it's all connected to the same Bhagavad Purana, the same basic themes, the creation of the universe. The Puranas, all the different Puranas, there are 18 Puranas. Purana means old, but it actually also means history. So each one of them present the history of a universe from the particular point of view of how that personality, who is the main character in that Purana, manifests in the universe. The Varaha Purana, the Shiva Purana, the Durga Purana. There are 18 Puranas, some for those in the mode of goodness, some for those in the mode of passion, and some for those in the mode of ignorance, all to give information how those living entities in those different modes of material nature can gather knowledge and information, follow rules and regulations to be elevated. The whole purpose is to elevate. That's why the purpose of this universe, the purpose of the material manifestation, is to give the chance to the conditioned living entities to go back home, back to Godhead, and Bhagavad Purana is the foremost of all that knowledge. And here we see that Sanat Kumar is hearing from Lord Sankarshan, but it's the same thing. It may be a little bit different in certain contexts, but the basic theme and topics of absolute truth always remain the same.
So I have a couple questions. One is, but how does this answer Badra's question about Sanat Kumar being
could be a different kalpa?
Kalpa, okay. So then the other question is that is Maitreya Muni the son of Parashara?
No, he's the disciple of Parasara.
Okay, and then Pulasya Muni, what's the relationship between him and Parashara
He
Muni?
was the father. Pulasya Muni.
What was that?
I thought he was the father of Maitreya, Pulasya Muni.
No,
I don't know.
no.
Nanda, can you help
Pulasya
us?
Muni, I didn't put it all in this purport, but Pulasya Muni was the head of the, he was something of the demons, leader of the demons.
Oh yeah, he was he was the creator of the demons,
Right.
or like the father. Yeah.
There was more to this purport, but because it's only a review, I didn't include it. And it describes in there that more detailed purport, how Parasara came to speak this particular Bhagavat Purana to his disciple Maitreya, and now Maitreya will speak it to Vidura.
So that means, is that in the current Kalpa then? I mean, coming down from Lord Brahma, or is this still talking about when Lord Shankarshan spoke it to the Kumara?
At this point, just like the tree branches off, it's the exact same knowledge. In the second canto, when Sukadev Goswami answered Parikshit Maharaj's questions, chapter 9 is titled Answers Citing the Lord's Version. So in that chapter, it's very briefly described how Lord Brahma appeared and couldn't find his origin. And then remember that whole part about the two syllables, tapa, manifest from beyond. And then he performed his tapasya. That was a particular kalpa. That was Lord Vishnu who spoke and revealed himself to Brahma. In another kalpa, Lord Brahma does the same thing and actually gets a vision of Goloka Vrindavan. That's when he composes Brahma Samhita. This particular narration is another time when Lord Sankarshan is speaking the same information or the same pastime from his point of view. You might also remember in the beginning of Brihat Bhagavatamrita, Jaimini Rishi is speaking to Janamejaya, Maharaj Parikshit's son. And Maharaj Parikshit's son, Janamejaya, says to him, I've heard the Bhagavat, I've heard the Mahabharat from Vyasadeva, but I'm really enjoying your particular rendition of it. So please continue and speak more about the essence of it. So different sages, different self-realized souls may have a slightly different present, just like class. If we hear a class on a particular topic, there's so many different things that people may say all on that topic. So in the same way, this is being described by Lord Sankarshan, this pastime of the creation of the universe. That's actually where it's going into, and the creation by Brahma.
I have a question here. What are we absolutely sure this is another kalpa? Why couldn't the sages go down and speak with Shankarshan?
No, we're not. I'm not sure, but it does say here that Srimad Bhagavatam was being narrated from time immemorial by the disciplic succession, even before the time of Vyasadeva. So it seems to indicate that it was before.
It was before Vyasadeva, but Vyasadeva came later. Then, we're talking about Lord Brahma hearing it from Krishna and the Kumaras hearing from Shankarshan.
Yeah, that could happen.
So it could be the same kalpa.
Yes,
it could
certainly.
Easily be the same kalpa. All right. I think we'll go on with Faye reading the next couple of verses, and then Vaishnavi, and then that will finish our readings for today. Faye, could you read this, please?
Yes, Mataji. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Srimad Bhagavatam 3.8.10. At that time, when the three worlds were submerged in water, Garbhodasha Vishnu was alone, lying on his bedstead, and the great snake Ananta, and although he appeared to be in slumber in his own internal potency, free from the action of the external energy, his eyes were not completely closed. Srimad Bhagavatam 3.8.11. Just like the strength of the fire within fuel wood, the Lord remained within the water of dissolution, submerging all the living entities in their subtle bodies. He lay in the self-invigorated energy called Kala. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. After the three worlds, the upper, lower, and middle planetary systems merged into the water of dissolution, the living entities of all the three worlds remained in their subtle bodies by dint of the energy called Kala. In this dissolution, the gross bodies became unmanifest, but the subtle bodies existed, just like the water of the material creation. Thus, the material energy was not completely wound up, as it is in the as is the case in the full dissolution of the material world.
I have a question about this. I don't know who can, if you can answer it, that would be really far out. Do the subtle bodies, are they controlled by time? We know that the gross bodies are controlled by time. How about the subtle bodies? Does anyone know? I'm genuinely asking this. I do not know.
They're actually material energy made up of subtle mind, intelligence, and false ego. So yes, they're under the control of time.
Thank you. What else do you have to say? Thank you so much, Patty. Faye, can you add to this? What did you get out of reading this purport?
Taking the two verses together and then the purport's subtleties, it struck me that even when the Lord is supposedly sleeping, he is busy, he is active, always, just as he is eternal. These subtle bodies, I hadn't thought about that as it's mentioned in the purport much before. I understood that the soul was the jiva, atma, the soul was eternal, and that the material covering was temporary and would be destroyed in time. But I hadn't given much thought to, well, what's going on here with the subtle body, except at some point the subtle body needs to take on another material form one more time to get one more opportunity to get it right, to associate with the Lord. It's so interesting. Every time I read these, I see something different. But my key takeaway in this was the Lord is maybe resting, apparently. His internal energies are always busy, and even when he's slumbering, and his external energies may not be as apparently active. Srila Prabhupada comments upon it, and also the verse mentions it. His eyes are half closed. He's always active. There's something always eternally going on, and it strikes a chord of beauty for me, in that these activities are so perfectly orchestrated. No matter what kalpa we consider, no matter what universes we're thinking about, what manifestation of Lord Brahma we're thinking about, which creation, it's orchestrated so beautifully. It fits together eternally, magnificently. I'm still tripping over the verse that explains the Ganges as a celestial transportation route coming from the toes of Lord at the top of the universe, going down throughout all of the universes. And that's how the sages and great personalities could through their mystic potencies, submerge themselves and pop up someplace else. I'm thinking of a gigantic water slide and just how they could pop in and out. And it's mind-blowing to think of a celestial transcendental river that goes everywhere. So this has been a fabulous set of verses to discuss and hear.
Thank you.
Thank
Also,
you.
the Lord is complete. He is complete, and everything is, and all the little, it says in Ishopanishad, everything coming from the complete is also complete. So when he dreams, are we part of his dream? And you know, we're in the material world, and a whole series of circumstances is created to facilitate our activities. So, and he can lie there and everything's going on. It's not that he's passionately endeavoring to do something, right? The Lord is, everything is happening due to his consciousness and control of everything. And it's not that he exerts himself, although he does take rest. Thank you so much, Faye. So we'll conclude this with Vaishnavi.
Actually,
one
okay.
more point.
Yep, just one point. And as far as our timeline is concerned, this is at the end of Brahma's night, when the three worlds are merged into the water of dissolution, but not the entire universe. There are a few planets even above the higher planets where that doesn't get dissolved. And Srila Prabhupada's pointing out here, the material energy was not completely wound up, as is the case in the full dissolution of the material world. So this is just one day of Brahma, or one awakening of Brahma that's being described.
So, yeah, I think it's not that he has to go down the lotus stem every day. That's at the beginning of his birth, and he takes rest at night and continues the activities in the day, right?
I don't think that's true. I think he's bewildered, and maybe chances are
every single day he gets up, he's bewildered.
The previous Brahma may have been bewildered, may have been liberated, and now a new entity is there. He forgets what's going on because we'll read about it. This is the name of this chapter is Manifestation of Brahma from Garbhodakshay Vishnu. So somehow or another that event, we'll see as we progress.
Well, no, he lives 100 years and he takes rest at night.
As we were describing the other day, that's not the same entity. Brahma is a post.
All right, this is an infinite discussion. Okay, we'll go on now with Vaishnavi. Would you please finish up for us?
All right, Srimad Bhagavatam 3.8.12. The Lord lay down for 1,000 cycles of 4 yugas in his internal potency, and by his external energy he appeared to be sleeping within the water. When the living entities were coming out for further development of their fruitive activities, actuated by the energy called Kala Shakti, he saw his transcendental body as bluish. Purport. In the Vishnu Purana, Kala Shakti is mentioned as avidya. The symptom of the influence of Kala Shakti is that one has to work in the material world for fruitive results. The fruitive workers are described in Bhagavad Gita as mudhas, or foolish. Such foolish living entities are very enthusiastic to work for some temporary benefit within perpetual bondage. One thinks himself very clever throughout his life if he is able to leave behind him a great asset of wealth for his children, or to achieve the temporary benefit. He takes the risk of all sinful activities without knowledge that such activities will keep him perpetually bound by the shackles of material bondage. Due to this polluted mentality and due to material sins, the aggregate combination of living entities appeared to be bluish. Such an impetus of activity for fruitive result is made possible by the dictation of the external energy of the Lord Kala.
Oh my goodness. What do you think, Vaishnavi?
I don't have anything to think. It is, Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita also, Kalosmi lokakshaya, so I am, time I am. So.
Yeah, and the fruit of activities in the body of the Lord makes his body turn blue. It's not his blue color as Krishna is blue. It's the fruit of activities and all the material desires of the conditioned souls that transform the body of the Lord to become a different color. Chetan, did you have a question?
I was thinking this purport is the best explanation of time, Kala Shakti, that I've ever read. And it explains so much about why there is no time in the spiritual world, but it's here in the material world to facilitate our nonsense fruitive activities. And I love this. Kala Shakti is mentioned as avidya. What could be more clear? It's there just because we choose ignorance over connection with the divine.
Anyone else have something to say about that? Patty, it's Aisha. Where is Aisha? Nandaji. Okay, everyone is told. Oh, Seisha has a question even.
I have a question. To what degree do we have to master this knowledge to perfect our own spiritual life? We were just discussing different kalpas. Was it a different kalpa? It was explained by this great saint in that kalpa, but in another kalpa is explained by 4 Kumars. I mean, it's quite complex. But how much is necessary for us to completely understand and be completely conversant with to achieve our own perfection?
My understanding is that all of this knowledge is presented to us to help us surrender to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And there are all different kinds of people. Some people will be very intellectual or not so intellectual. But this knowledge we're talking about goes into the heart. It's actually knowledge of the soul. And we're all, as we purify our existence on a very basic level, by hearing these topics, we become purified. By chanting the holy name, by associating with Krishna in these different capacities, we become purified, and then we surrender. It said in another purport a while back that Krishna becomes very dear to us, and we accept his will. We surrender to him. So all of this transcendental knowledge is to give us faith and help us to surrender to the Supreme Lord. That's my understanding. Hatice, you have something else? And Bhaja has something.
This morning I had a nice thought about Srimad Bhagavatam in itself, because I knew that this was coming up and Maitreya was going to glorify the Bhagavatam and then speak it. Just like a body requires certain nutrients in the womb, then different nutrients as it grows as a young boy or girl, then even more different nutrients in their adolescence, and finally old age. It requires different vitamins. They have seniors, different, active senior vitamins or whatever. There are different. So similarly, as our bhakti lata grows, as a living entity grows and matures in its relationship with the Supreme Lord, there are different informations, cultural experiences, devotees and gurus that living entity comes in contact with, appropriate to their development in their relationship with the Supreme Lord. And as Samapriya was saying, I like that point, some may be more attuned to particular aspects of that knowledge than others. They don't need that nutrient. It's not really necessary for them, but for some it is, so it's available. And I think that Srimad Bhagavatam specifically prescribed by Lord Chaitanya in this age is the foremost nutrient as a product. And each person that spends their time with it, as they mature to the perfection of prema, it will nourish them with information along the way, appropriate to that necessity.
It changes our thought patterns and helps us to change our attitude.
Share your realization about hearing once that you had that today. You were sharing something.
Yeah. In the material world, people have to hear for a long time. You know, they go to college, they have to study so long, and and we think that this most elevated knowledge we can hear only once and then we have it. Oh, I read the Bhagavatam, I read the Gita, but this somebody mentioned just before that just hearing, I think Faye, just hearing this, it's newer and newer and newer. This even you read it once, you read it twice, you say, this is the nature of transcendental knowledge, that we're always, if you really, that's why we spend so much time trying to study Prabhupada's books, because there's so much nectar in it. Every time you read it, you hear more and more different things. So we shouldn't think that it doesn't require hearing constantly. This is our life, and it's never hackneyed. And even though we might not understand all the different things coming from all the different yugas and all the different, I mean, it can get like a lot of knowledge. The essence of the Vedas is to fall in love with Krishna. That's the essence of it. That's the essence of Srimad Bhagavatam. And also it is the essence of Shikshastika, if you only want to read 8 verses. But here we are studying Bhagavatam, which is the incarnation of Krishna. So
it's recommended for some reason.
Yes.
Right. In Bhagavad Gita, chapter 8, it describes boot for paliyate, that this material world is created and annihilated again and again. It's a basic statement, and that's good information. But what's going to go on after this description by Maitreya is detailed information of how that happens. So it's not a prerequisite information to understand the details, but understanding how it happens that this material world is a temporary abode. The better we understand that, the better it is. That, I guess that's the answer to the question, Sesha. It's not a prerequisite that we understand all the calculations, but the information in its basic context is important.
Thank you. I appreciate that, because the questions seem relevant. And I guess when the questions are relevant, then the knowledge follows, even if you have to keep going over and over again.
It's actually not an intellectual pursuit once the heart is pure. You know, we'll appreciate all the magnificence of all this beyond. Actually, we can't understand. We can't, but we can appreciate it. Go figure. We can't understand, but we can appreciate it. You know, more and more. And that's what we want to be, always thrilled, just like it says in Bhagavad Gita at the end, the last, thrilled at every moment. And that's cool. I want to be thrilled at every moment. I'm getting worn out. This body is not capable of being thrilled at every moment, but we have spiritual body can be thrilled at every moment.
And you said Bhadra had something?
Bhadraji, what did you want to say?
Well, I mean, Dhruv Maharaj Prabhu already said everything. But the point is that even the Ananta Shesha, he has millions of mouth, and he cannot glorify, even is unlimited.
Yes.
So the knowledge is unlimited. And what the heck this tiny brain can understand all these things? But at least we know that by hearing Srimad Bhagavatam and reciting Srimad Bhagavatam, our heart is going to purify, and at the heart should purify. And at the same time, ultimately, after all this going through the 9th canto, we want to come to the 10th canto. We want to go in get the 4 rasas. One of the establish our relationship with the Lord in whatever our position is there. That's where we want to come to ultimately, so that we go in the relationship with Krishna. So this all knowledge we are getting is keeping us tuned in that mood, and to continue and have more and deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper faith in this parampara, in this knowledge. And that helps us also chanting Hare Krishna at the same time, and to come to our original conscious position. That's my understanding.
Right. Well, very important. Just like my husband said, there must be a reason for this. This is the recommended process for self-realization. And the first canto is actually just as important as the 10th canto. You cannot get to the top of the ladder unless you take the first step, which is very vital. Thank you, Vajra. Did anyone
everyone.
have anything
Yeah,
else?
I think we
Anyone
can
want
stop
to say
now,
something before we? Okay, we have to stop.
Tisha? Oh, okay. Yes, very much. Thank you. Hare Krishna.
Thank you, everyone. Vanchakopatruvyascha,
Deva
Kripasindhubhya
cha
Patitanam
patitanam
Pavanebhyo
bhavebhyo
Vaishnavebhyo.
Vaishnavebhyo namo namaha.
Hari Hari
Thank you,
Bol.
Hare Hare
everyone.
Bol.
Hare
Radhe
Prabhuji,
Krishna.
Hare
Radhe.
Krishna.
Radhe Radhe. Hare Krishna.